Value is a mystery. Our job as salespeople and as businesses is to solve the value mystery. And the mystery is how our customers define value.
Coffee's for closers only.
So we've established my proposal is sound in principle. Now we're just haggling over price.
Let's see how much we're going for on eBay.
Man, it's the same as Dunkin' Donuts. Costs 15 times the price.
Welcome to Impact Pricing, the podcast where we discuss pricing, value, and the intricate relationships between them. I'm Mark Stiving, host of the podcast, and today we have Mike Wilkinson, the value selling expert. Here are 3 things you want to know about Mike before we start. First, he's published 3 best-selling books, Value-Based Pricing, The 7 Challenges of Value, and his newest one, The Challenge of Value. Second, he's a sales expert who got pulled into this world of pricing. Can't wait to learn from him. And finally, he's been consulting, speaking, and teaching on value selling for 30 years now. Oh, and his favorite scotch is Bowmore 12. Welcome, Mike.
Hi, Mark. Nice to talk to you, especially the Bowmore 12.
Yeah, exactly. How did you get into pricing?
Thought you were going to ask how I got into malt whiskey. I didn't. Just correct part of it. I'm not really into pricing. The business I work with and my partner is the pricing expert. I am the sales expert. And we look at pricing or price management as 2 distinct things. One is the price setting bit, and the other is the price getting bit. And the bit that I'm most interested in is the price getting part of the process. So once you pricing guys have spent all of your hours in darkened rooms coming up with prices, the next challenge is how do you make sure that the sales guys don't go out and completely obliterate your great plans and discount everything. So it's all about how do we actually get the sales team to understand value, understand the ability to communicate value effectively so that you can defend your prices against downward pricing pressure in those circumstances and build your prices up on the basis of value delivered if you have the opportunity to do that.
Well, I couldn't agree more. I tend to think of it all as one thing because if we're not capturing the price at the end after the salesperson's closed the deal, we didn't really get the pricing right up front either. Right? Something along that process has fallen apart. And our goal as pricing people should be to make sure that at the very end, we're capturing average selling prices that are higher or at least capturing more of the value that we're able to deliver. And that requires salespeople knowing what they're doing, knowing how to sell value. Most sales consultants or sales training that I've seen, they don't talk about value and how to sell value. How did you get there? What happened with this?
Well, that's an interesting point, and I think you're absolutely right. If you have a sales team who cannot sell on the basis of value, then the challenge of actually getting the prices that you have set becomes a much bigger challenge. And certainly in my experience, most sales directors will be able to tell you, or sales VPs will tell you, that when a salesman comes back having lost a deal, and he says, why did we lose the deal? The answer is usually, well, because if only we discounted the price another 5 or 10%, we would have won that. I very rarely hear anybody come back and say, well, if only I had communicated our value more effectively, we could have won that deal. Because it just does not happen. The route I took, there were 2 real routes into it. One was I was speaking at a conference in Copenhagen, probably 10 or 12 years ago. And the night before the conference, we were all out for dinner. And it was a big chemical company, and there were loads of sales guys there. And virtually everybody told me that what they sold was great value. In fact, I heard the word value so often that evening that I thought, I'm going to do something different in the morning. And the following day, I actually said to these guys, I said, all you told me was that you sold great value. So what I'd really like to understand is what is value? And there were about 10 tables of about 10 or 12 people each, and I gave them the task for each table to come up with their definition of value. And the minute I gave them the task, you just knew that we were not going to be getting 10 definitions back that were all the same. And they really struggled. They really did struggle to come up with a definition. And we had 10 different definitions with clearly, obviously, some similarities, but one definition that I turned over these cards. I thought I'd read the cards out and just, read out what the definitions were. And I got halfway through the pack and I turned a card over and it had 4 words on it. And the first 2 words were value is, and the second 2 words were a mystery. So their definition was value is a mystery. And I thought, well, that's absolutely ridiculous. I can't read that out. The more I spent, or the more time I spent thinking about it, the better definition I thought it was. And for me, that is the definition that I now use. Value is a mystery. And as our job as salespeople and as businesses is to solve the value mystery. And the mystery is how our customers define value. Because if we do not understand what our customers see as value, it's a difficult job. Because while we may see something as value, if our customers don't see it that way, it's not value.
I love the exercise. I think that's fascinating. I often do something pretty similar. And then I have a different definition of value, if I could share it with you.
Go for it. Yeah.
I think of value is, what is a customer willing to pay?
Yeah, I mean, yes, and this whole concept of willingness to pay is another very interesting one. Because if you think about if we accept that value is defined by the customer and not by us, which for me is absolutely the heart of the whole process of understanding value, and that willingness to pay is a key driver in our ability to get the prices that we have set, then that the salesman's ability or the need for the salespeople to understand customers to a level and to a depth that they've never understood them before is really, really important. And there are things about customers that salespeople need to understand today that they never needed to have before.
Absolutely brilliant. I tend to think that salespeople, we know our products really, really well, but there's no way we know a customer's business and how much value we could deliver to that business with our product. Customer, on the other hand, knows their business pretty well, not really, really well, but there's no way they could figure out about our product and know how much value our product is going to deliver to them. It really takes both of us together to come to that conversation to say, can we impact your business?
I think that's absolutely right. I know there's lots of people who will tell you that increasingly customers don't need salespeople anymore. They only need to go to the website and they see everything that we do. And whilst that is true, I think the point that you make there is just so important. As a supplier, as a salesman supplier, I should understand my products and the application of my products better than anybody else. As a customer, I should understand my business and the challenges my business faces better than anybody else. It seems to me that the opportunity for us to come together and build a relationship where we can work together to think about the most effective ways of solving those challenges is really quite an important one.
That's spot on, because any customer who has a problem, they haven't solved the problem before, now they want to go out and buy a product to solve that problem. There's no way they know everything there is to know about all the different ways you might be able to solve the problem. It really takes a conversation. It really takes work to go figure this out. I think that's spot on. You have something, or you use a set of words called the value challenge often. Is that something that you can define as well? What is the value challenge?
Well, you spotted the two books are called The Challenge of Value and The 7 Challenges of Value.
But by the way, did 6 challenges go away? Is that?
Well, actually, your introduction, you got me the wrong way round, actually. The latest book is The 7 Challenges of Value. The Challenge of Value was the first one. And it was interesting because I did quite a lot of conference speaking, and I was at an event and I was talking about the Challenge of Value. And somebody came up to me and said, that was actually really interesting. What are the challenges of value then? And I thought, hell, that's a really good question. And that is where the 7 challenges of value come from. And the 7 challenges, and we did a lot of research on this to come up with what we believe are the right 7 challenges. But they are the challenges that any business or any sales guy faces when they're starting out in terms of trying to sell on value. You know, what do we need to understand in terms of value all the way through to how do we actually then go about delivering it? So I wrapped all of that around this sort of concept of the value challenge. I have in my head other potential value challenges. So there is a value challenge of pricing, for example. The whole process is about how do we identify and tackle the challenges that we face in selling our value effectively. And the starting point is, for me, understanding what value is. Because you can't, it's a big challenge. If you have no idea how to define value and you have no idea what the component elements of value are, then you're going to struggle. So that's the starting point of the value challenge is to actually understand value.
So step 1 is knowing what is value. Can you quickly mention the 7 challenges? I just want to hear what they are.
Yeah, no problem at all. 7 challenges of value. Challenge number 1, you have to understand what value is. And that is as a concept, and particularly what value means to your customer. So the concept being, you need a framework around which to hang your value. And we developed a process and we call it the Value Triad. And in the Value Triad, there are 3 component elements of value. One is revenue gain. And the question you would ask yourself there is, how does my product or service help my customer improve their revenue? The next component is cost reduction. And the question there is, how does my product or service help my customer to reduce their costs? And then the final component is what we call emotional contribution. So if you think about it, the revenue gain and cost reduction are very objective. They're logical measures. Emotional contribution is very subjective and is much, much less logical. It's the reason why you can put together what you consider to be an absolutely no-brainer argument for somebody to buy something and they still turn you down. It's the emotional bit that drives that.
Yeah, so on the emotional side, it's, the buyer happened to be best friends with my competitor. Nothing I could do about that.
It could be all of those sorts of things. For me, the emotional contribution side is trust, rapport, the value of your brand, their image, their view of your organization, how easy you make it to work with them, risk, all sorts of things which are much more difficult to actually pin down, but which are nevertheless very important.
Yeah, I like that you put that into value. I tend to leave that out of value. I can't put a number on it.
Right. You can't. It's very difficult to put a number on it. You're absolutely right. But you can't leave it out of value, because as long as people are involved in the decision-making process, emotion will be part of it. Yeah, businesses don't make decisions. People make decisions. And unless you employ people, all of whom are like Spock on Star Trek, who are completely logical, unless you come up with people like that, emotion will always form part of the decision-making process.
Although I agree, I don't like that.
Well, it's funnily enough, when we came up with it, I was given the task to try to find out how you could actually monetize emotional contribution, and I struggled. I think the reason why we have it in there is because it is a huge part of the decision-making process, and we would not wish anybody to think that they could get away without thinking about it. They have to think about the relationships that they have with the buyers and the influences that they see. It's just part of the process.
Yeah, I often hear the phrase, buyers decide emotionally and justify logically.
Yeah, and I think that's probably absolutely true.
Yeah.
It's the reason why we go out and buy Mercedes and BMW when, frankly, something a lot smaller and a lot cheaper would do perfectly well.
No, I think you're mistaken. I need a BMW.
There you go, you see there. And you would justify that to your wife, I'm sure.
Okay, can you give us another one?
Right, that's number 1. So number 1, understand value. Number 2 is a strange one, and that is you have to recognize that people's perceptions of value are constantly changing. So because I know what you value today does not mean you will value the same things in a month's time, a week's time, or whatever it is, because there are constant changes. Your boss has changed, legislation has changed, government has changed, all sorts of things change. So you have to constantly check. People's perceptions of value today are what they were previously. The third component is identifying people who care about your value. And this is actually quite an important one, because if people don't care about the value that you can deliver, then no matter how hard you try, you won't be able to sell on the basis of value. I still think they're relatively few and far between. There are people who will buy solely on the basis of price. Really, nothing else matters. The only thing that matters is price. I actually happen to think that they're rather less prevalent than people, I think, generally make out. Everybody, I think, buys on the basis of value. No matter what price you pay, there is a value that you are wanting in return for that price.
Although I agree with that, I also agree that every decision, every purchase includes a price, and we always want to pay less, almost always want to pay less. So it feels like price is one of those things where people are going to push back on. And so we'll always feel this price pressure. It always feels like people are buying on price, even though they're not.
I think that's absolutely right. And if I was a buyer, I would always tell you were too expensive. Always. Why would I tell you that? Well, because my experience is that 99% of salespeople, when they're told they're too expensive, default to discount. So the very first thing since I know that most sellers will discount when I tell them they're too expensive, I would be wrong in my head if I was a buyer not to tell you that you were too expensive. But this is where the value thing comes in. The value thing comes in when you really understand and appreciate the value that you are delivering to that customer. So when the customer says to you, you're too expensive, I can look you in the eye and say, Mark, actually, we're not too expensive at all. And when you think about the value that you are going to get out of the purchase, I would go as far as to suggest that perhaps we're not expensive enough.
Yes.
I can remember doing this exercise, and one particular client, we've been through this, and the sales VP, we had a meeting about 2-3 months afterwards, and we sat down in the office, and he turned to me and he said, it's been extraordinary. He said, I've never realized just how much courage you needed to sit in front of a buyer and say no. He said, but I've actually started to say no. And when they said to me, you're too expensive, I've said, no, I'm not. When you think about the value that you're getting out of the purchase you're making, I'm not too expensive. And he said, he said, I made an extraordinary discovery. He said, in at least 50% of the cases, the buyer looked at me, shrugged their shoulders and said, okay. He said, that was just amazing to me. And he said, and I said, well, did you lose any business? And he said, yes, we did. He said, but I can tell you that virtually all the business that we lost was either business that we really didn't value because it was more bloody trouble than it was worth, or they were back within the next few months.
Yeah, and if you think about it, not giving that discount was free money.
Yeah, absolutely.
All profit, all free money.
Well, this concept of the power of one, I think is important. This is this concept which says if you put 1% on your price, you're going to get an 8 to 11% improvement in bottom line profit or whatever it might be.
Yep.
I think that's a really important one because you're right. You don't have to make any more, sell any more, do anything more. It's just straight bottom line profit.
Yeah, absolutely. So number 3 was find the right people, which, by the way, I think of that as not only a sales issue, because salespeople who are doing prospecting want to figure out who to prospect with, how to do your qualifications. So I know these are the clients that are going to be willing to pay me more. I also think this is a marketing issue where marketing should be focusing their lead generation efforts on who are the right people. How do we get the right market segment or the right buyers into the funnel?
Oh, completely agree. If ever there was a very good reason for sales and marketing working much more closely together these days, that's it. This really should be a joint effort between sales and marketing to not only just target, but also to validate the opportunities that you want to pursue.
Yep.
So I think segmenting, part of the whole, again, there's a whole other discussion around segmentation on the basis of value delivery, which I think is another interesting area, but not for today, probably.
Mike, we're going to run out of time. Can you just give me 4?
I could give you the other 2. Yes, I can. So we've got understand value, recognize that value is constantly changing, identify the key people, differentiate your solution, and bearing in mind that being different is not differentiation. Yeah, differentiation is being different in ways that your customers value. Number 5 is communicate your value. It's extraordinary sometimes how difficult people find this, but this is the home, if you like, of the value proposition. The reason why the customer should choose you rather than any competing alternative. Number 6 is capture your value in your price. This is the bit that will interest you. There is absolutely no point spending all this time understanding and communicating your value to then not capture some of that value in the price that you charge and benefit from that. And then the final challenge is to deliver your promise. Because if you think about it, challenges 1 to 6 really are your value promise. The reality is challenge 7 when you deliver it. And you need to make sure that you are delivering on your promise because your reputation rests upon your ability to do that. So if you're not, you need to put it right. If you are, don't forget to remind the customer that you are, because your customers will generally be very good at completely forgetting when you're delivering everything that you promised you would.
But I do have to say that when I think about the whole pricing problem, I think of it as companies need to create value, they need to communicate value, and then they need to capture value.
Yes.
And those are actually your 4, 5, and 6 as I look through those. So they align really, really well. because creating value is really creating differentiation or creating products that people care about or solving problems that other people don't. And that's really where the value comes from.
And interestingly enough, those 3 steps come after understanding customer value. So you need to understand the things that customer values first, because there are lots of examples of businesses creating products because they can, not necessarily because anybody wants them.
Yes. And I would say that they're not creating value. They're creating products.
Yes, I think that's fair comment. Yeah. If they were creating value, people would be buying them.
Yes, that's exactly right. That's exactly right. Mike, we are almost out of time. Let me ask one last question. What's the one pricing advice, or if you want, you could say value advice?
Yeah, I say value advice.
Do you think could have a big impact?
Yeah, for me, it's absolutely the core of it. Your customers define value, not you. And because that's true, you have to solve the value mystery.
I think that's a great line. Your customers define value, not you.
That's right.
Perfect. And Mike, thank you so much for your time today. If anyone wants to contact you, how can they do that?
The best way is probably by just sending me an email, and I'd be really delighted to hear from anybody. And my email address is MW, that's M for Mike, W for Whiskey, at Axia Value, AXIA, axiavalue.com.
Excellent. And I understand that you have a program that teaches this value challenge, the 7 value challenges, and that you're going to offer a discount to our listeners today.
Yeah, this is me not practicing what I preach. When you said to me, it's too expensive, I should have said to you, no, it isn't, given the value that it delivers. But I agreed to, I did agree to offer a 20% discount. The discount is on a package called the Value Challenge System. And the Value Challenge System is specifically designed to address the 7 challenges of value, to take you from understanding value at the beginning to delivering value at the end. It's a series of 14 modules. Every module has an MP4, an MP3, a transcript, and a workbook and an action plan. It's just a great way of going on what I call the value journey.
Excellent. And the link to the Value Challenge System will be in our show notes.
Yeah, I think that's probably, that's the best place for it. So yeah, if you want to know any more about it, if you click on the link on the show notes, not only will you be able to buy it, but it will tell you a lot more about it and what the content is as well.
Okay, and if you're going to use the impact code, what's the impact code? The coupon code.
That is impact. The coupon code will be impact, and that will give you 20% off.
Perfect. And to our listeners, I hope you enjoyed that as much as I did. Your feedback is absolutely crucial to making this podcast valuable to you. So please send any to mark@impactpricing.com. Also, feel free to send in any questions. We might try to answer them on a future episode. And finally, please join us next week for a new episode of Impact Pricing.